Welcome to Testmaking and Assessment for English Teachers, sponsored by the Embassy of the United States and Akita International University. This is the fourth lecture of the series. In this lecture, we will discuss integrated skills testing. An integrated skills test is a test which tests two or more language skills simultaneously. For example, a test item that requires a test taker to first read a passage and then write a summary or write an opinion response would be considered an integrated skills test, targeting both reading and writing. To be a true integrated skills test, reading comprehension and the written output are both assessed. The scoring rubric should require the test taker to demonstrate that the reading was comprehended and integrated into the written summary or opinion response. Integrated skills is also used to refer to tests claimed to measure general English proficiency. Traditionally, the two test styles that have been claimed to measure general English proficiency are dictation and the cloze test. To summarize, we can say that integrated skills tasks generally aim to test language in context, with a focus on meaning and communication. True integrated skills tests have both a receptive and a productive element. Let's begin by looking at the familiar dictation test. We will first look at the traditional procedure for dictation, and then discuss some ways that we might make it more communication-oriented. The simplest form of dictation may be well known to teachers. Test takers listen to a sentence or a passage. Pauses are made during the listening, pauses that are long enough for test takers to write down what they have heard. Optionally, the sentence or passage may be repeated. There are many variations. For example, parts of the passage may be written and test takers fill in the missing words. However, the basic procedure is test takers listen to spoken language, a receptive skill, and then reproduce in writing what they have heard. Dictation is an integrative skills test because two skills are involved: listening, a receptive skill, and writing, a productive skill. While dictation is considered by some to be a test of listening only, research has demonstrated that doing dictation successfully draws on other language skills. In particular, test takers make use of grammar and vocabulary knowledge. The extent to which dictation requires grammar, vocabulary, and productive language skills depends in part on how it is presented. For example, if dictated segments are short, with long pauses, and repeated several times, learners may be able to write the sentences by simply imitating the sounds. However, if the pace is fast, there are few repetitions, or there is a need to understand the language in context, cognitive demands make it more difficult to reproduce the language from imitation alone. Comprehension is also necessary. For this reason, dictation may be a good test of global English skills or general language proficiency. We are next going to look at a technique that specifically makes dictation cognitively demanding and at the same time even more integrative. In a technique called meaning-focused dictation, test takers must accurately write down a sentence they hear, but they are forced to process the sentence for meaning as well. One way to accomplish this is to create two places on the answer sheet to write each dictated sentence. Students must make a decision about the meaning of the sentence before they begin writing. Here is an example. This dictation item is related to a reading passage, which the test takers read just before the dictation begins. If the test is presented on paper rather than computer, test takers can be allowed to refer to the passage as they do the dictation. Ideally, they must decide whether the sentence is true or false before they begin writing, although this may not be practical in some testing situations. Test takers might lose a point for missing the true or false. However, this is not absolutely necessary. The test designer may decide to focus only on accuracy of the sentence when scoring. The true purpose of the true or false element is to increase the cognitive load so that students cannot rely on simply memorizing the sequence of sounds when they write the answers. Needing to think about the meaning of the sentence and whether it is true or false should erase the sounds from their short-term memory. What they then produce in writing is a good representation of what they are able to produce under less controlled circumstances. This makes the test a more valid measure of global English proficiency. We are also adding another skill, reading, to the test, so it is even more integrated. Here is another example of a true or false dictation test item that I have used with junior high school students. The test is related to a textbook unit where students practiced giving and following directions based on a map. In particular, they practiced prepositional phrases such as next to, across from, and just past that are useful for giving directions. The map was copied from the textbook and included on the test problem sheet. These 4 sentences were taped and played in the classroom as part of the listening section of a midterm test. Each sentence was read 2 times at normal speed, but pronounced clearly. After the second reading, there was a 12-second pause for the test takers to write their sentence. It was not practical in the situation to prevent students from changing the location of a sentence after they began writing, so that was not included in the instructions. However, they were given 1 point for the true or false element. This testing approach is integrative because it involves listening to the dictated sentences, scanning the map as they are listening to see whether the sentences are true or false, and finally, writing them down accurately. This type of test item can potentially test 3 language skills in context, as well as spelling and grammatical accuracy. A disadvantage of dictation is the difficulty with scoring the results. Let's consider some options for scoring dictation. Brown and Abewick-Rama, on page 174, provide a list of criteria that could be used for marking dictation, depending on your purpose. Clearly, however, these criteria are complicated and can be difficult to keep track of. If several teachers are marking the dictation, it will be difficult to stay consistent. Perhaps we can simplify the criteria somewhat by categorizing them. For example, we could categorize ways to mark dictation into 3 approaches. In the phonetically accurate method, there are no points off for minor spelling errors so long as the word is recognizable. Other errors, such as missing words or incorrect word order, will be counted as errors. Let's note, however, that this approach is generally used when the test designer regards dictation as a test of listening comprehension, as opposed to an integrated skills test. The next approach is to divide error types into serious versus minor errors. For example, punctuation, spelling, missing articles, or prepositions could be considered minor errors. Misunderstood content words, or words that change the meaning significantly, are considered major errors. Minor errors can be ignored, or they might be weighted differently. For example, 1 point off for a minor error, but 3 points off for a major error. Another approach to marking dictation I call the total accuracy approach. This approach treats all errors equally, including spelling and punctuation. A set number of points is allowed for each sentence, usually 4 or 5 points. The grader puts a slash through each error and deducts 1 point for each, up to the maximum. This last approach is easier to explain to students and other teachers. Also, by treating all errors equally, it reinforces dictation as an integrated skills test. Spelling and punctuation, which are usually considered writing skills, are considered to be equally important as understanding the main content words, which is usually considered a listening skill. Let's list some of the errors that should be included. In this scoring guide, which is necessary if dictation is included on a test, each sentence is worth a maximum of 5 points, for a total of 20 points if there are 4 sentences. Mark 1 point off for each error, up to 5 points per sentence. So a sentence with 5 or more mistakes receives 0 points. Each of the following can be counted as an error: a misspelled word or capitalization error, an extra word, one that was not spoken in the dictation, a word with missing letters, such as a missing S or ED ending, a wrong word, such as long instead of wrong, a missing word, such as a missing the, or 2 words in reverse order, such as slowly go instead of go slowly. Here I want to point out that whether a word was heard incorrectly, or was heard correctly but misspelled, or was understood but the test taker made a grammatical error, is often ambiguous. It can be very time-consuming to decide what kind of error something is when grading. An advantage of the total accuracy method is that all errors are penalized 1 point, so the grader does not need to think about what kind of error it is. Here is an example of 4 sentences from the previous MAP dictation, marked using the total accuracy method. I will pause here for a few seconds. Study the sentences and errors. Can you mark these 4 sentences using the scoring guide on the previous slide? If you would like to try, pause the movie and mark the sentences. After you resume the movie, you can see the marks that I gave the sentences. Are you ready to continue? Here are the marks that I gave the sentences using the scoring guide strictly. The first sentence is marked as having 3 errors. Office is missing. Pass should be passed, so it was either misspelled or misheard. And finally, past and just are in reverse order, so that is an error. This sentence receives 2 points. In the second sentence, is marked as an extra word, and cross is either misheard or perhaps is meant to be across, but is misspelled. We really don't know, but we are treating these as 2 errors. Do you think this should be treated as one error? Perhaps the extra space between and cross could be considered a single spelling error? Although I would like to give the student that point, by a strict interpretation of the scoring guide, this counts as 2 errors, so the test taker gets only 3 points. For sentence 3, there is a missing word, next to. If you look closely at the map, you will see that ABC Travel is a proper noun and is capitalized. So both of these words count as separate capitalization errors. That makes a total of 3 errors, and the student gets only 2 points for this sentence. Again, this feels very tough, but if the scoring guide is followed strictly, both ABC and travel count as errors. Finally, in sentence 4, the is missing. Cinema is either misspelled or not understood, and has been substituted for the just before supermarket. We are treating this as a wrong word, not a missing word and an extra word. Consequently, the test taker gets only 2 points for this last sentence. Incidentally, the misspelling of cinema as cinema is a good example of when not penalizing spelling errors is a troublesome method for marking dictation. Would you consider this a spelling error? Or has the test taker substituted a Japanese word for an unknown English word? I would argue that the test taker has clearly understood the word but cannot spell it. But many teachers have disagreed with me about this. The point is that with the phonetically accurate method of scoring, you might need to call a conference with another teacher to decide. But with the total accuracy scoring method, there is no need to debate whether cinema is a major or a minor error. Let's next consider the cloze test. A traditional cloze test is a reading passage with some words deleted. The test taker must write in the missing words with no other information than what is provided by the other words or the context of the passage. Let me first point out that cloze is spelled with a Z rather than an S. The spelling and the test originally came from Gestalt psychology. The test was later adapted for language testing, and the spelling cloze was kept. We can notice immediately that completing a cloze test requires not only understanding the meaning of the passage, but also a good knowledge of parts of speech, grammatical endings, discourse skills such as pronoun antecedents, and vocabulary and collocations. It is easy to see why this test format is testing global language skills or general proficiency. We can also say that the cloze format is an integrative skills test because it has a receptive element, reading, and a productive element, producing and adding the missing words. There are many variations on the cloze test format. One popular variation is the matching cloze. In this variation, a list of words is supplied, and test takers choose their answers from the list. This can simplify scoring, because there is often more than one word that could fit in a blank. Without a list, teachers usually need to consult a native speaker to determine whether an alternate answer might be acceptable. Although the matching format makes scoring easier, it also tends to make the cloze test receptive rather than productive, and thus less of an integrated skills test. Nevertheless, many teachers use this matching cloze format with a familiar reading passage, one taken from the textbook. This can be a good format for testing whether students have learned targeted vocabulary, grammatical forms, grammar words such as prepositions, and whether they have a general comprehension of a reading passage that they have studied. Another variation is known as the listening cloze or cloze dictation. In this variation, words are deleted from a series of sentences in a passage. Deletion can be decided by a rule, such as every 10th word will be deleted, or the test designer can selectively delete words based on part of speech, whether they are important content words, their grammatical form, or other criteria. The passage is read quickly, allowing only short pauses for learners to enter the words they hear or that they sense belong. The dictation cloze format usually uses exact scoring. That means only the original word that was deleted and is spoken is acceptable. For example, the first two sentences in the example above might be read as follows. The majority of people have at least one pet at some time in their lives. Sometimes the relationship between a pet dog or cat and its owner is so close that they begin to resemble each other in their appearance and behavior. A sample of content words, pronouns, prepositions, and demonstratives have been deleted from this passage. Vocabulary and grammatical knowledge can certainly be used to fill in some of the missing words. In addition, the test now involves 3 language skills: reading, listening, and written production. Is this a good test of global English proficiency as well as integrated skills? What do you think? The cloze dictation test that you saw on the previous slide was an excerpt from a test created by Maki, Waseda, and Hashimoto in 2002. It has been published and is known as the Minimal English Test. The Minimal English Test is based on 2 reading passages, each with 18 sentences, taken from a university English textbook. 2 words of 4 letters or less have been deleted from each sentence, for a total of 72 deletions. The 2 passages are read aloud by a female native speaker for the first passage and a male native speaker for the second passage. The reading, at 125 words per minute, takes 5 minutes. Do you believe this test could be an indirect test of global English proficiency, including speaking skill? Masaya Kanzaki, a professor at Kanda University of International Studies and an author of TOEIC training materials, researched the relationship between sections of the TOEIC test and the Minimal English Test. Most students take only the TOEIC listening and reading test. Fewer students take TOEIC speaking test because it is expensive. Kanzaki wanted to investigate which test is the best indirect test of speaking for situations where students or institutions cannot afford to give a TOEIC speaking test to every student. Of the above, the TOEIC reading, TOEIC listening, and Minimal English Test, which do you think would be the best predictor of the TOEIC speaking score? These numbers are correlations. They show the strength of the relationship between 2 tests, or we can say that they show how well one test can predict the score on another test, which is the definition of an indirect test. The lowest correlation is between TOEIC speaking and TOEIC reading. These 2 test sections are related, but the relationship is not strong. The correlation between TOEIC speaking and TOEIC listening, at 0.45, is a little stronger than reading. This is not too surprising because listening and speaking are both oral skills. Most teachers would guess that of these four tests, the TOEIC listening test would probably be the best predictor or indirect test of the TOEIC speaking test. But surprisingly, Kanzaki found the minimal English test to be the best indirect test of TOEIC speaking scores. Why would a cloze dictation be a better indirect test of speaking than a listening test? Possibly because the cloze dictation requires listening ability and oral skill like speaking together with a productive skill. Its integrative nature and perhaps the level of concentration it requires makes it a good predictive indirect test of speaking. The point to remember is that an integrative test can also be used as an indirect test of speaking or writing. It can be difficult to include a speaking and writing test every semester because of the teacher time required to organize, conduct, and mark these tests. But if you are looking for a practical solution, dictation, cloze reading, and cloze dictation are not only good integrative skills tests, but can also be practical substitutes for direct tests of speaking and writing. Testing specialists usually classify dictation, cloze, and cloze dictation as integrative tests and recognize that these tests indirectly measure global language proficiency. In this lecture, I have also chosen to include them under the general label of integrated skills. However, cloze and dictation may not be what comes to most teachers' minds when they think of integrated skills tests. For most teachers, a true integrated test includes a receptive stimulus, such as a reading passage, recorded conversation, or a lecture, followed by a direct test of speaking or writing, such as an interview, a speech, or a written composition. The testing task is an integration task that requires test takers to produce written or oral output that incorporates evidence from the receptive stimulus. The rubric used for evaluation includes criteria for the language produced, such as fluency and accuracy, as well as how well the output has incorporated the evidence from the receptive stimulus. This integrative skills approach is widely used in the TOEFL IBT. Here are some examples. In TOEFL IBT Speaking Task 2, test takers first read a short announcement about a policy. They next listen to two speakers discussing the policy. One speaker strongly supports or opposes the policy. Test takers then orally summarize the speaker's opinion and the reasons he or she gave to support the opinion. This task uses two receptive stimuli, a short written announcement and a recorded conversation, followed by an integration task that requires test takers to summarize one of the two speakers in the recorded conversation. The written passage provides context for the conversation, as well as a vocabulary resource for the test taker. However, the integration task does not directly require the speaking passage to be summarized. In the internet-based TOEFL test, the speaking tasks are monologued. There is no interaction with an interviewer. The spoken responses are recorded for later evaluation. In the TOEFL IBT Writing Task 1, the test taker first reads a short article on an academic topic. The article explains a theory, concept, or idea and provides 3 reasons to support it. Test takers next listen to a lecture where a professor challenges the reading, providing a rebuttal point for each of the three reasons given in the reading passage. The integration task then requires the test taker to summarize in writing the lecturer's rebuttal, point by point. Test takers are allowed 20 minutes to type their essay into a computer. The evaluation criteria for this task include criteria for the quality of writing, as well as whether the test taker has adequately understood and summarized each of the three rebuttal points. The TOEFL IBT integrated tasks are excellent designs for testing whether test takers can use English in real-world academic tasks. However, TOEFL is designed for students who wish to study abroad. It is much too difficult to be used for most junior and senior high school students. The question is, can we adapt these integrated skills test designs for our classroom tests? A direct integrated skills task does not need to be difficult. We can use easy or simplified language, taking topic ideas directly from our textbooks. It will be more interesting and challenging if we create original reading and audio passages. With the help of a native-speaking ALT, it shouldn't be too difficult to use themes and vocabulary from the textbooks. Here's an example. We begin with a reading passage. Like the TOEFL IBT integrated tasks, the reading passage helps create some context for the conversation that follows. It provides scaffolding for students, priming them with vocabulary they will hear and activating their background knowledge. After a set time for reading, a conversation between two students is played. The conversation could be recorded by two ALTs or between an ALT and a JTE. After the conversation has been played, students are given an integration task. In this example, a teacher interviewer asks each student 2 questions. Notice that one of Asako's 2 reasons is mentioned in the reading. This is intended to be an easier speaking response task, especially if test takers can continue to see the reading when they respond to the questions. The second reason, however, is only mentioned in the recorded conversation. Some expressions in the conversation, such as Kenji's remark, "Do you mean there will be many people coming from foreign countries?" function as a kind of distractor. The test taker must focus on Asako's reasons. Evaluation criteria might consider how much detail is provided. For example, a top-scoring summary of the second reason would include information such as, she hopes to meet people from other countries there, exchange students will be selling food and doing performances, and she thinks it will be easy to make conversations with them. In this example, a teacher interviewer asks 2 questions. However, there are many variations for the integration task. For example, it could be presented as a writing task, or if technology is available, students could be instructed to record their response and then upload it so that teachers could evaluate it later. When used as classroom assessments, direct integrative skills assessments have problems with practicality. The main problem is these assessment designs can require a lot of time. If there are multiple stimuli, such as the assessment described on the previous slide, teachers must allow for reading time, listening time, and speaking or writing time. If administered one-on-one, integrative skills assessments can take time away from instruction. For example, a reading plus a listening followed by an interview could take as long as 10 minutes per student. This would require 3 or even 4 class periods to conduct, taking far too much time away from instruction. However, technology may offer solutions. To make these integrated skills assessments practical for classroom testing, it may be more practical to have students record their voices and upload their files for the teacher to grade at a later time. Listening and marking each recording is still very time-consuming for the teacher, but if students record their tests in a group session or record in their private time, it solves the problem of too much time taken from instruction. Just a few years ago, using technology for language assessment was daunting, both to teachers and to school administrators who were concerned about privacy and security. Much has changed since the coronavirus pandemic forced many schools to provide online classes. Teachers are now much more familiar with using technology to present material and conduct classes. Many new services and platforms have appeared specifically for education. It is beyond the scope of this lecture to go over the technology options for presenting readings and lectures and recording responses. In any case, these apps and services are changing so rapidly, it is better to ask colleagues what they are using. I hope that course participants will share what technology they are using in the assignment. I have scanned and uploaded 2 excerpts from language assessment. They are short sections and contain some additional information about dictation and cloze tests. That is the end of the lecture for Module 4. Good luck with your Integrated Skills Assessment assignment.